My name is Theodore Hargrove. I'm 58 years old, and 4 months ago my son-in-law stood in my own kitchen, well, what used to be my kitchen, before I sold it, and told me that if I didn't have dinner ready by 6 every night, I could find somewhere else to live. I didn't shout. I didn't even put my coffee cup down particularly hard. I just nodded, finished my coffee, and started planning my exit so quietly that nobody in that house noticed until the day I was already gone. 3 weeks after I left, my daughter called me 11 times in one afternoon. Before I get into it, if you're new here, stick around. There's more where this came from, and I'd love to know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. Let me back up to the beginning, because none of this makes sense without it. I spent 31 years working the rail yards outside Hamilton, Ontario, first as a brakeman, then eventually running maintenance crews for the line. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest, and it pays well enough if you're careful with your money, which I was. My wife Carol and I bought a little brick bungalow in Stoney Creek back in 1994, raised our daughter there, paid off the mortgage early, the whole thing. Carol passed 2 winters ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast, the kind that doesn't give you time to prepare even though everyone tells you it will. After she was gone, the house felt like it had 30 extra rooms in it. I'd walk past her sewing room and just stand in the doorway some mornings before I could make myself go down and make coffee. My daughter Hannah called me that spring. Her voice had that particular brightness people use when they've already decided something and are just walking you toward agreeing with it. Dad, you shouldn't be rattling around in that house by yourself. Come stay with us. The kids would love it, and honestly, it'd be good for you. I want to be honest. I wanted to believe her. I was lonely in a way I hadn't expected. The kind of lonely that makes a grown man eat cereal standing over the sink because sitting at a table built for 2 feels like a joke nobody's laughing at. So I sold the bungalow, got a fair price, put most of it into GICs and a modest investment account. Because that's what 31 years on the railway teaches you. You don't trust anything you can't see the bottom of. And in May, I packed up what fit into a U-Haul trailer and drove the 4 hours up to Barrie, where Hannah and her husband Greg had a newer place near Lake Simcoe, the kind of house with a bonus room over the garage and a kitchen island the size of a canoe. Greg met me in the driveway. Firm handshake, sunglasses pushed up on his head even though it was overcast. Theodore, great to have you, buddy. Make yourself at home. He said it the way a man says things he's rehearsed, and I told myself I was being unfair, that grief makes you suspicious of kindness you haven't earned yet. The room they gave me was the smallest one in the house, off the kitchen, next to the laundry. It'll be handy for you, Greg said, setting my last box down. Close to everything. I thought at the time that he meant it as a comfort. It took me the better part of 3 months to understand he meant it as a job description. It started small, the way these things always do. I made breakfast the first morning because I was up early out of habit. 31 years of 6 a.m. shifts doesn't leave you easily. Hannah came down to bacon and eggs and looked so pleased, so genuinely happy, that I made it again the next morning, and the next. Within 2 weeks, it wasn't a kindness anymore. It was an expectation, the kind nobody says out loud because saying it out loud would mean admitting what it actually was. Laundry came next. Then it was me driving my grandkids, Maddie and Cole, to hockey practice 3 mornings a week, because Greg's got back-to-back calls and Hannah's swamped at the clinic. I didn't mind the driving, truthfully. It was the only part of those months I'd take back if I could relive it, sitting in that truck with Maddie singing along badly to the radio. But the rest of it accumulated like snow against a door, quiet, and then one day you can't get out. Greg's mother, Carol Ann, came up from Kitchener for Thanksgiving in October. Pleasant woman, brought a butter tart from some bakery she swore by, hugged Greg with both arms the way mothers do when they haven't seen their sons in a while. Over dinner, which I had cooked, every dish of it, down to the gravy, she told a story about how Greg never had to lift a finger growing up because she always just took care of everything. It was never a burden, it was love. She smiled at me when she said it. I smiled back. Later that night, through the wall, I heard Greg's voice, low, not meant to carry. My mom never made a thing of any of it. She just did it because she felt needed. He wasn't talking to anyone in particular. Hannah was in the room with him. I kept folding towels in the laundry room and didn't say anything. The next afternoon, I found Hannah alone for a few minutes and asked her straight out, "Do you think I'm doing too much around here?" She frowned like the question had landed sideways. "Dad, Greg's never once been rude to you." That was it. That was the whole defense. No rudeness, therefore no problem, as if cruelty was the only thing on the list of things that could hurt a person. There was a Saturday in November I'll always remember, because it was the first time I didn't make breakfast. I just sat at the little desk in my room with a cup of coffee and a library book. Greg came into the kitchen, opened the fridge, stood there a long moment, closed it again, and said nothing. But from that morning on, there was a coolness in how he looked at me, like I'd broken some agreement I'd never actually signed. I tried once more, properly this time. A Thursday evening, Greg out at a client dinner, Hannah home early with the kids already in bed. I asked her to sit with me at the table. I don't mind helping, I told her. I never have. But I'd like to be asked, not assumed. I'd like to be part of decisions about my own day. She looked at me with that careful, guarded face people get when they think they're about to be accused of something. Has Greg said something to you? No, I said. Greg's never said an unkind word to me directly. That's not the issue. I told her, family doesn't sleep in the room next to the laundry, because it's convenient for everyone else's schedule. Family doesn't cook dinner for guests it isn't invited to sit down with. She got very quiet, then said, Dad, I don't know what you want me to say. You're not staff here. You're family, I said. I know I'm family. That's exactly my point. She picked her phone back up off the table, conversation over. The thing that finally did it wasn't even the worst thing that happened in that house. It was small, almost funny in a bitter way. Greg got a promotion in late November. Regional Sales Director, a title he could say at a dinner party without footnotes. They decided to throw a party, a real one, 14 people, colleagues, his boss, a few couples from the neighborhood. Hannah turned to me in the kitchen before she'd even finished the sentence. Dad, you'll handle the food, right? You're so good at it. I set down the towel I was holding. Handle it how? I asked. Plan the menu or cook the whole thing. Cook it, obviously, she said, like I'd asked something strange. And will I be sitting down with everyone? Something moved across her face. Not quite guilt, more like the discomfort of being asked to say a true thing out loud. It's mostly Greg's work people, Dad. You wouldn't really know anyone. I asked who else was coming that I wouldn't know. She mentioned her friend Brittany was coming, someone I'd met exactly twice. I didn't say anything else. I just nodded and went back to planning a menu for 14 people I'd be feeding and not sitting with. That Saturday I cooked for 9 hours. Prime rib, scalloped potatoes, a trifle for dessert because Hannah loved the one Carol used to make and asked for it special. I wore my good shirt under my apron because some stubborn part of me still hoped I'd be asked to join. At 6:30, with the first guests already in the living room, Greg came into the kitchen and said low and almost kind, like he was doing me a favor. Hey, why don't you just eat in your room tonight, get some rest? You've been on your feet all day. I looked at him for a long moment. Behind him through the kitchen doorway, I could see Hannah laughing with Brittany. A glass of wine in her hand, completely at ease, like nothing in that house had ever cost anyone anything. I didn't argue. I plated myself a small dinner, took it to my room, and ate it sitting on the edge of the bed I'd been sleeping in for 7 months, listening to laughter through the wall. And somewhere in the middle of that meal, eating prime rib, I'd cooked alone in a room next to the laundry. Something in me that had been bending quietly for months simply stopped bending. I didn't say a word about it that night, or the next day, or the day after. I want to be clear about that, because I think it matters. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was done arguing a case nobody on the other side wanted to hear. On the Tuesday after the party, while Hannah was at work and Greg was at the office and the kids were at school, I packed. It didn't take long. I'd never really unpacked, if I'm honest with myself. The suitcase had lived under that bed since May. I called a mover I'd found weeks earlier, just in case, and by 2 o'clock that afternoon, what little I'd brought into that house was in a truck heading to a one-bedroom apartment I'd quietly leased in Barrie proper, close to the lake, close enough to walk to a grocery store and a little diner I'd scouted out on my own. I left a note on the kitchen counter, not long. It said, I love you and the kids. I'm not angry. I just can't keep being useful instead of being wanted. I'll call you soon. I was gone before anyone got home. I didn't leave a forwarding number on purpose, not out of spite, but because I needed one clean week without my phone buzzing every time someone needed something from me. Hannah called 9 times that first night, 11 times the next afternoon, all in the space of about 2 hours, the calls stacking up the way they do when someone's gone from confused to scared. I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't trying to make a point. I genuinely needed the silence to figure out who I was when I wasn't cooking someone's dinner. When I finally called her back, 4 days later, her voice was different. Smaller, the bravado gone out of it. Dad, where are you? Are you okay? Why would you just leave like that? I told her, gently, that I was fine, that I had an apartment, that I wasn't trying to scare her. Why didn't you say something, she asked, and there was real hurt in it, which surprised me. I did say something, I told her. In the laundry room, at the kitchen table on that Thursday. I said it as plainly as I knew how. You just didn't hear it as something that needed an answer. There was a long silence on the line. Then she said quiet, "The note said you weren't angry, were you lying?" "No," I said. I wasn't angry. I was just done being the answer to a question nobody was asking out loud. It took a few weeks, but Hannah started coming to see me on her own, without Greg, without the kids at first. We'd sit in my little kitchen, table for two, which didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like exactly enough, and she'd talk slowly about things she was starting to notice. She told me, in December, that she'd started seeing a counselor on her own, not for the marriage, just for herself. "She's helping me figure out some patterns," Hannah said carefully, like she was trying the words on for size. "Things I didn't realize I was doing, to myself." I told her I was glad. I meant it without any leftover edge. "Did you know, before you left, that this was going to happen?" She asked me once in January, both of us with mugs of tea going cold between us. I thought about it honestly before answering. "No," I said. "I didn't know anything was going to happen. I just knew I couldn't keep doing what I was doing." She was quiet a moment. "I think that took more nerve than I gave you credit for." I told her it hadn't felt like nerve at the time. It had just felt like the only honest thing left to do. As for Greg, things between them are still finding their shape. I don't know where that ends up, and that's not mine to decide or even guess at out loud. What I do know is that the last time he and I spoke on the phone, he was quieter than I'd ever heard him, and he said something close to an apology, which from a man like that, I understood to be as far as he was likely to go, and I let it be enough. In January, I joined a curling club 2 blocks from my apartment, mostly because a neighbor mentioned they were short a player and I had nothing on my Tuesday nights. I hadn't thrown a rock since I was a younger man up north with my own father, decades ago. The first night back on the ice, my knees complaining, my aim embarrassingly rusty. One of the other fellows, Walter, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, it comes back to you. The ice doesn't care how long you've been away. It just responds to how you throw it." I laughed, actually laughed, for what felt like the first time in close to a year. Looking back on those 7 months in Barrie, here's what I understand now that I didn't understand standing in that driveway shaking Greg's hand. I had confused being needed with being loved. They can live in the same house. Sometimes they even look identical from the outside, but they are not the same thing. And when one quietly replaces the other, what's left isn't family anymore. It's an arrangement wearing family's clothes. I spent 7 months cooking and driving and folding laundry because some part of me, hollowed out by losing Carol, mistook the weight of being depended on for the warmth of actually being wanted. It took a dinner I ate alone on the edge of a bed to show me how far apart those two things had drifted. I don't regret going to Barrie. I don't regret most of those months, not entirely. They taught me I still had it in me to walk out of something that wasn't right, quietly, without a single raised voice, at 58 years old, with nowhere near as much certainty as I probably sounded like I had. If you're sitting somewhere right now in a situation that's been asking you to make yourself smaller than you are, you don't need a speech. You don't need to win the argument. Sometimes you just need to pack the suitcase you never fully unpacked and go. Before I let you go, I want to ask you something, and I'd love to hear it in the comments. If you'd been standing in my place that night, eating dinner alone in a room next to the laundry while everyone else laughed through the wall, would you have stayed and tried again, or would you have packed